Well, that was a thing.
I'm not letting out a sigh of disappointment. Surprisingly, it's a sigh of relief. I'm relieved that I now have the time to release these videos in their intended format. The plan for this series, well, I'm going to be honest, this wasn't even going to be a series. I was going to review every single volume of RWBY in a single video, kind of like how Crunchyroll did that One Piece timeline. I felt like that video was incredibly well made. Not only did it go over the entire One Piece story from its inception up to the point of recording, they went over stuff like live action events such as plays or exhibits. It was not only a timeline of the story, but it was also a timeline of the franchise as a whole, which is kind of the approach I wanted to use when covering RWBY. Things didn't turn out the way I wanted. One, for some reason, I had completely abandoned the approach I wanted to use. Instead, I opted to go the totally not Mark route, which I don't really think I did a good job of replicating. Two, the editing could have been so much better. Like, let's be honest, it really could have. My sounds weren't balanced properly, and I kept cutting my audio at weird. Some of the visuals needed to be smoother when they entered the screen, and I needed to improve massively at shitposting. Wait, did I just swear for real this time? Don't tell my mom. Although that video was well received, for a DumiLumLum video that is, I still felt as if I could do more, and that's why this video exists. This video is a massive overhaul of the format I used in the previous one. I felt as if I was mostly summarizing the story and called it a day. Well, for the second half of the video, I mostly summarized. By far, the best part of the video was everything up until Jean, cause that's where I firstly set up the thesis statement and actually expanded upon it. I don't think I touched base with my statement when I was covering the Weiss and Blake stuff. I didn't even review the end of the Blake drama in Volume 1. I just said, they had a satisfying ending, and that was it. Don't worry though, I have an entire video essay ready for why I think that entire ending wasn't as satisfying as I initially thought it was. That covers all of my gripes with that video. Now it's time to discuss what I'm actually going to do to overhaul everything. Well, for starters, I realized that making a video as grand as the one I had envisioned would have been a stupid idea, given that none of my current hardware could possibly handle that. And I'm very lazy, so I made a compromise. Why don't I make the series more concise, but still give it the sense that I'm covering things on a large scale? That is where I got the idea to make each video cover a group of volumes instead of all of them collectively. That idea also ties in nicely with current world events. Each video will discuss 3 volumes of RWBY each, as I believe every 3 volumes is like an era in the show. Or at least after every 3rd volume, the gang changes outfits. So volumes 1 to 3 are what I have dubbed the Monty era, considering that those are the volumes he worked on. 4 to 6, I haven't come up with a name for those. 8 to 9, you know what, let's just call that the Atlas arc. This video will wrap up the Monty era, so I'll be covering volumes 2 and 3, which upon second viewing, I can happily say are the absolute pinnacle of the series. Well, Volume 3 is the absolute pinnacle of the series. Out of the first 3, Volume 2 is the absolute pinnacle of Dog Feast. Whoa! I mean, these volumes are perfect in every single way. I don't think that they're not as good as I remember them being. I mean, why would I think that about any show I've watched in the past? We should focus solely on what emotions were generated from engaging with the media in general, and completely ignore how build-ups to any payoffs even happened in the first place. Jokes aside, I want to make it clear that I did like Volume 3. Just not 2. There was a lot of stuff that I liked about 2, but the sheer fact that it somehow achieved a feat that I thought was nigh impossible of any show that exists, and also the fact that it had a lot of other issues that could have been circumvented with good and thought out writing, its legacy has been soiled.
Why are you there?
I was glad to find out that I wasn't the only person who thought that Volume 2 was disappointing. Anyways, let's not waste any more time. This video is a long one, so we need to be the arrow to Pyrrha's heart and go straight through it.
「
As you know, I really enjoyed watching Volume 1 again, especially since I had so much respect and appreciation for Monty's work. Sure, the writing was very on the nose, but Shawcross and Luna were taking steps in the right direction since they often found the right balance of fun and seriousness. I say that whilst ignoring the continuity errors.
Apologies for the poor camera quality. I just want to acknowledge one mistake I made in the last video. Torchwick does have an aura. Just doesn't have a semblance, so Ruby still claps his cheeks every single day of the week.
So knowing that I thoroughly enjoyed Volume 1, I had very high expectations going into 2. For starters, they overhauled the production value by quite a bit. The production diary was a valuable asset to getting a look into how things ticked. I suggest everyone doing research on the show gives it a watch.
One of the cool things about this season is we don't have the shadow people anymore. Now we have actual people. It's kind of a strange thing where you won't necessarily pay attention to them, which is what you kind of want. It really sets the tone that it's a vibrant city.
Yeah, it was extremely jarring that Nora's model was reused to create this thing. Not only do you get behind the scenes info, we actually get to see a time where a certain notion was once possible. The notion that everybody liked Rooster Teeth. The company is a shadow of what it once was, and one can only be curious as to how this downfall even started. However, we're mostly gonna focus on what's directly in front of us. The crew were more determined and skilled than ever when producing Volume 2. The sheer fact that they were able to have a good relationship with their fans and iron out every nagging issue the first volume had made it certain in the minds of many RWBY viewers that things could only go up from this point. That was a sigh of disappointment. What in the mother-fathering, child-orphaning damnation happened? How is it that so many key events that take place in this volume are either instigated by blatant stupidity, luck, or a mixture of the two? I apologize for sounding so cynical, but Volume 2 is a perfect example of a victim of for the sake of the plot. Let's get this straight. The person that wins at the end of the day is the one that the author decides to win. No question about that. But if they clearly forget the rules they themselves set up, or throw cause and effect completely out the window, then any stakes they set up are no longer natural enough to be considered thrilling. They are all, whether intentional or not, fabricated. Now, there are many reasons why showrunners may cut back on showcasing a character's powers. Budget is a good example. Animation is expensive and time-consuming, but you can always find a way to write around things. Say, Ruby's leg is injured for a few episodes, or, because she's younger than everyone, her aura capacity is lower. It would make sense that she's unable to use her super speed to try and solve her problems as efficiently as possible. However, that's way too boring and totally not better than having her be a complete bellend. I am certain that there are many creative ways in which you could halt a character's progress towards their respective payoffs, but unfortunately, Volume 2 mostly does not offer that kind of writing. This is seen because characters' abilities weren't taken into too much consideration. The word of today is implications. If a character has an ability that doesn't have its restrictions properly established or not at all, then it implies that they should either abuse it or use it in situations where they'd actually be more helpful than using conventional methods. Case in point, Emerald. Emerald's existence somehow makes Volume 2 achieve a feat I never thought was possible. I went into this volume so hopeful that it would be a massive improvement over its senior, and yet somehow it has a worse introductory scene because of today's word, implications. Emerald has a power so unbelievably broken that it can not only fool human beings but digital technology too. She has the ability to make people hallucinate. Hallucinations are full sensory overload. Not only is your sight affected, but your hearing too. Maybe your taste. Bottom line, your entire perception of something is altered. This ability has a massive range, enough to affect an entire stadium full of people and affect live broadcasts. Knowing this, your entire understanding of how Tuxin dies should shift completely. Emerald and Mercury plan on murdering a Faunus who is defecting from the White Fang, Tuxin. However, there are signs that indicate that Emerald did not ever use her semblance, nor have I found anyone in the main cast or writing team that claims that she did. For starters, why did Mercury feel the need to black out Tuxin's window? I'm pretty sure that's completely unnecessary given that Emerald could just fool everyone passing it by with her powers. doors. If anything, blacking out the windows just makes them seem a tad bit suspicious. What if a guard happened to be passing by and saw people who clearly weren't the owners doing this? If anyone outside thought it was strange that the window was blacked out, or if another customer walked in? It would have been very interesting to see how Emerald and Mercury dealt with a natural inconvenience to their plan like that. There's a very simple solution to this. Just make Emerald say something edgy like, "Don't even bother screaming." It implies that she has a resource or ability that allows her to block out the sounds of the murder. It would be a glimpse into how tightly run their entire operation is, but instead, it's just cut and dry clumsiness. Secondly, gunshots tend to make a lot of noise, and stores aren't particularly soundproof. Someone definitely had to have heard Mercury shotgunning Tuxon's brain out, and before you say this is where Emerald used her semblance, I'd like to remind you that there was no visual or audio cue that suggests that she did. Again, there's a visual one that suggests that she didn't. Immediately after Emerald and Mercury exit the store, they are reported by the citizens passing it by, and their entire plan to infiltrate Beacon Academy is foiled, just because one of them decided not to use her ability that would have circumvented all of this.
What then? What was the plan then, genius?
I don't know.
You don't know. You know why you don't know? Because you don't think. That's why. You don't think. You never figured out how to think, did you?
I'm joking. They just walk out of there as if nothing happened. This scene is never referred to again in any more episodes of the series, and no character will ever have to suffer the consequences of Tuxon's death. That, my friends, is the curse of being a minor character. This is just a small taste of character stupidity. I could go over the time RWBY got herself captured for no reason at the end of the volume, but you already know the story.
I'm lead for the B. To the top, grand dogs with me.
My attention is more focused towards Mommy Cinder, who is voice acted by none other than Jessica Nigri. Cinder is the current main villain if you are this far in the show. She was characterized relatively well in terms of how she asserts herself over not only Emerald and Mercury, but Torchwick too. Emerald is initially established as someone who is incredibly selfish, which plays into her being inspired off of Aladdin, a thief, someone who only succeeds by taking from others. Cinder's presence alone then makes her do a complete 180. She now becomes a people pleaser. She speaks in a manner that props herself up whilst putting Torchwick down for the sake of getting Cinder's approval. Other than Mercury calling her out on her BS, Cinder being around is the first instance Emerald is not in control of her situation. She had robbed a man unsuspectingly, grilled Tuxon into snapping, as bad as that scene was, but now she's disappointed and meek. This enhances what your perception of someone like Cinder is truly capable of if she has such a hold over her subordinates, a hold that makes them contradict themselves. As the great Eisen-sama once said, there is nothing easier to control than someone who reveres you, and admiration is a feeling furthest from understanding. There's a lot to like about Mommy Cinder in terms of her psychological appeal, but at the same time, she is not exempt from implications. Episode 7 of Volume 2 is hands down the worst one, even with Juan and Pyrrha's reconciliation. This episode, if it was actually planned thoroughly, had a lot of potential, and I'll get into that in a bit. This episode is full of so many holes that it would make an Espada jealous. Episode 7 takes place during the Beacon Academy dance. RWBY is all alone, a complete social outcast. She could do many things at this moment. Go grab a drink and sit in a corner. Maybe one of her friends or even Yang, out of pity, could offer her a dance. Alternatively, if she's no longer feeling the vibe, she could just go home and call it a day or get fresh air. These are very natural actions that could be taken. She decides that it's about time she heads out, and what's this? Woo, notices contrivance. Let's have a look-see here. She sees Cinder at the very moment
At this time of the year.
she begins her plan to infiltrate the terminal as she runs across rooftops. This, my friends, is what I have now formally dubbed a Camilla slip. I mean, sure, what RWBY did was completely natural, even though those other scenarios I listed could have happened. However, the fact that the antagonist's operation and the time she decided to call it a night even intertwined doesn't make sense. Luck was the driving factor that RWBY RWBY even got involved in the conflict in the first place. That is lazy writing. And before you say, it's incredibly lucky that Team RWBY was formed in the first place, thus making my argument invalid since I was able to overlook that and not this, I suggest you watch Mauler's rant on plot convenience. Cinder's whole plan was to wait until Ironwood and the guests were distracted so that she could start making her way into breaking into the terminal tower and steal information that will be pivotal to the plot. However, many factors need to be taken into account. Firstly, I don't buy the fact that they'd make a stuff up as trivial as this. If people arrived very late, a guard shone a light in her general direction, or if someone decided to leave early since they either had schoolwork to catch up on or decided to just call it a night, which clearly happened, I'm sure they would have absolutely taken care of those issues just fine. To me at least, it doesn't seem that plausible that an operation as tightly run as Cinder's wouldn't have accounted for something, albeit random, very natural. We're clearly shown that not everyone at the party is dancing, so it would be very reasonable for Emerald to give Cinder a heads up about that, yet she didn't. Even so, Team Seaman definitely could have anticipated that not everyone wanted to dance. However, since RWBY is the main character and we need a confrontation with Cinder, all of that is negated for the sake of the plot. Secondly, the world doesn't revolve around the dance hall. It's established that they have radio communication, so I'm sure someone as intelligent as Cinder could have chosen more discreet areas, like a dingy alleyway where she could hide in some boxes, or a garbage can, a restaurant where she could sneak out a bathroom window, or literally anywhere that wasn't this roof.
Aw, don't be stupid, dumbass.
Why was her being on the roof such a necessity? I'm really asking, why was she there? She had no reason to be there. She had eyes and ears in the party that could clearly communicate the exact timing she needed for the heist to go off without a hitch. However, since RWBY is the main character and we need a confrontation with Cinder, all of that is negated for the sake of the plot. If you've noticed, I want to approach this review from a standpoint grounded in constructive criticism. If I didn't think any of these scenes could be improved and just ripped into them, then I'd feel like I'm coming off as only irreverent and annoying. I really like RWBY. It has a fantastic setting, but a lot of its potential is being wasted due to continuity errors and a lack of commitment to its characterization. But the latter is a discussion for much later in the video. Not only do I have the hindsight needed to see where things could have been better, Rooster Teeth now have that too. I haven't watched Ice Queendom yet, but I feel like if it's going to be a massive reboot of the series, they should build it upon criticism they have from fans and really make sure to go in depth with what they've established very early on. Here's a suggestion from me personally about how episode 7 and subsequently 1 could have been massively improved. What if Tuxin tipped someone, say Ironwood, off about the break-in or any White Fang related info, but died in a way that protected the fact that he snitched? He was defecting anyway, so he'd probably have many reasons to act against the White Fang. Obviously, this would make Cinder considerably concerned. If he died so eagerly, then obviously he was protecting a secret, thus prompting her to search for any more data breaches in her plan, but she finds nothing and ultimately concludes that they'll have to be more careful from now on. As far as episode 7 is concerned, Ironwood could offer RWBY a drink as an icebreaker so that he has an opportunity to maybe grill some information about the White Fang out of her, to then have him reveal that the main reason he's at the dance in the first place is to better bait Cinder into breaking in, so they'd have an opportunity to catch her. When he gets the notification that she took the bait, he could bring RWBY along, and not her whole team, as to not disturb many people. Plus, guess who has super speed and would be really good at apprehending people? RWBY could also say that she doesn't want her team to come along since she doesn't want Blake to be stressed out, which we'll get into much later. If somebody asks where she's going, she could just tell them that she's going to talk with Ironwood about stuff like a scholarship to a school or something. Boom bam bop, we arrive at the top of the terminal and then everything plays out just fine, except it doesn't. Somehow, Cinder got away by escaping to the party. That isn't enough for her to be out of the woods, but not to worry. These two brilliant officers could just ask about where she may have gone. They should just ask Penny if she saw anything, considering that she's one of, if not the most perceptive persons in the room. As far as we're concerned, she doesn't have that hard of a time seeing through disguises.
Oh, you mean the Faunus girl. Wait, how did you know that?
The two guards could just describe who they saw when they were chasing her, and then Penny could assess everyone in the room. It would be a pretty cool way to add some more foreshadowing of Emerald's semblance, since it also affects digital technology. You could say Penny and everyone else in the room didn't see anything because of the hallucination. They just left without even asking. Her reasons for going to the dance are kind of wonky. They try to play everything off as if Cinder is one step ahead of everyone, which just breaks the show's continuity. I've been trying to wrap my head around this, but the decisions every character made just make it hurt immensely. The purpose of her attending the dance was to tell her team that the mission was completed and have a cover story that makes it seem as if it were impossible that she even conducted the heist. You do know that Alibi gets royally screwed over the moment multiple students, Yang included, mention the fact that you arrived late or they never saw you, right? Last thing on the agenda, why didn't she destroy her mask? If anyone with a brain picked it up for analysis, since she clearly left it in pristine condition, they would have been confused too. Why would a criminal run into a crowded hall of people and display their face to them when they had made an immense effort to preserve their identity before? A very reasonable conclusion they could jump to is that they wanted to be recognized by someone they knew in the crowd, which implicates the potential of students being involved in the master plan, which is something Team Seaman doesn't want to happen. I guess forensic science doesn't exist in a world more advanced than ours. Someone could just describe Cinder's basic features to the authorities, and since they should have realized that someone in the school is involved, Cinder would have fricked her whole plan over. Their whole plan hinges on its secrecy. Simple problems have simple solutions. Just destroy the mask. We're even shown that she can change clothes with magic or something. How come that ability affected all her other clothes but not the mask?
Aw, don't be stupid, dumbass!
There is another problem with how they presented the scene. Guess you can solve this problem in its entirety, yet the writers try to play it off as if Cinder was the one with big brain strats. This girl. There is little to no indication that Emerald even bothered to use her semblance, because the actions that Cinder took were completely unnecessary, given that Emerald could have just covered everything up just fine. She could have a clone of Cinder run off and lead the guards away from the hall so as to make it seem as if there's no connection between a student and the heist. That increases the chances that the feds could chalk it up to her just using the dance as a random getaway card. Those are very justifiable reasons why she could go to the dance in the first place. Since that didn't happen, the guards could ask anyone if they saw Cinder come in, since she definitely made a commotion as she rushed in the door. And guess what? If their suspicions lie on her, Volume 3's conflict may have panned out very differently. Yes, due to the way the scene was presented, if the good guys actually used their brains, then the entire start of a season may have been altered. When I realized that, my disappointment in this volume was cemented. They are so incredibly lucky that these two are absolute waste men. If Emerald didn't have the power to create hallucinations, then prior scenes that she was in would have only been damaged by their contrivances due to how lucky the villains were. Now they are also damaged due to the neglect shown towards her ability. The reason why Emerald is such a frustrating character to analyze is because of the fact that she could mostly fix those contrivances. Just imagine how much higher the stakes would have felt if they planned out how Emerald used her powers. These powers could be a bomb under the table, where instead of us finding thrill out of something sudden, we are forced to tightrope over the canyon that is Emerald's menace and Cinder's control. Now, I bet you're wondering something. Do I think the continuity errors far outweigh the good things Volume 2 had to offer? Well, if errors such as these are capable of breaking how an entire season of a show is started, then yes, I think the bad may just outweigh the good. Sure, themes are what give stories substance. They give our characters something to strive for, and they affect how we respond to storytelling. However, the most important thing at the end of the day is execution. Just how are you going to make the tackling of your central concerns feel deserved? Volume 2's failure to adhere to the rules set by its creators made it one of the most disappointing things I watched last year. This volume definitely had more production value put into it, and Monty was definitely at his A-game during this period. However, this volume fumbles the bag catastrophically, and I have a guess as to why. Part of that production diary allowed us to gain a bit of insight into how the show is written. The writing team is made up of Miles Luna, Kerry Shawcross, and Monty exclusively, but the diary shows us that it's Luna and Shawcross doing most of the heavy lifting in this department. Their process is as follows.
Yeah, no, yeah, comes up a lot.
Yeah,
That
no, yeah
phrase.
is like our catchphrase.
Yeah.
It's yes, I do think that's a good idea. No, don't doubt yourself. Yes, let's move forward with it. It's,
Yeah, no, yeah.
That's good.
Honestly, I don't care if they were slacking off. I do that all the time. My main issue is that I'm given the idea that they kinda yes-manned each other. The majority of Volume 2's conflict is a series of yeah, no, yes. Of course, when you write something, not everything is going to be good. I should know. I've rewritten the first chapter of my manga more than 5 times. It may even be in the double digits at this point. I'm just here wondering if they had anyone at all do continuity checks on their scripts. Someone who can help flesh out their ideas way more whilst also making sure they adhere to the rules they created in order to make stakes. I don't think that individual existed, because as has been established, Volume 3 should not be starting out the way we see. In all my time watching this show, I had high praises for Volume 2, but a lot of that has been thrown out the window. Volume 2 is a clusterfuck of logical errors and contrivances, all stemming from 1 or 2 characters, but despite that, there is something it does a bit better than Volume 1. Volume 2 is thematically superior to it. The character writing is way more complex this time since, now say it with me, RWBY is a subversion of fairy tales. Now, what is a fairy tale, or at least what are the main concerns covered by most of them? The story of good against evil, or to put it in a more broader sense, chess, that your opposition is your polar opposite, either black or white. However, white isn't necessarily good and black isn't necessarily evil, which is an analogy for RWBY's most powerful theme, one that was most prevalent in the first volume. The show makes great strides to show us that things aren't always black and white, and exposes the fact that situations have many shades of grey, not everything as simple as a fairy tale, where someone is either right or wrong. It does this through the dichotomies between its characters, RWBY and Weiss's clash of personalities, Weiss and Blake's clash of ideals, and so on. What dichotomies does Volume 2 have to offer? Well, Volume 1's clashes mostly had to deal with characters trying to find acceptance in new circumstances, which was perfectly fine for a first outing. This allowed us to form a bond with the characters and find reasons to support them since we're put in a relatable posture with them very early on. Volume 2 is more concerned with action versus inaction in every single one of its aspects. It even tackles this in its subplots, which I have chosen to act as the starting point of this analysis. Pyrrha and Jean's relationship sum up the main theme of the volume on a surface level. Jean's arc, get it, is still focused more on his self-confidence. His goal was to ask Weiss out to the dance, and he'd been struggling to find ways to go about it. His initial approach was to do something grand for his promposal, but that would only buy Weiss's affection rather than earn it. Pyrrha then tells him exactly how he should change his approach. Rather than trying to impress her, he just needs to be honest with her, which is advice Pyrrha herself needs to take.
But what?
Jean, you can't get it wrong if it's the truth.
Over the course of their time with one another, Pyrrha had developed feelings for Juan, but felt it was best not to act on them. This is where we get into action versus inaction. On one hand, we have Juan, someone who is at rock bottom, trying his darndest to find respect from those who've doubted him. One of those people being himself. At the current moment, many don't see him worthy enough to claim what he desires. Even though he lied initially, Juan chose to rise above his past actions. He saw the best in others, like Weiss, whilst also treating people like Pyrrha no differently than he would want to be treated. He is trying his best not only to be respected, but respect others, despite being the most disgraceful member of his lineage. He is taking action. On the other hand, we have Pyrrha, someone who has always gotten respect from everyone. She utilized her talent to become deserving of everything, but as she said, it put her on a pedestal and made her unattainable. Like she's an object! RWBY, is that sexism I smell? Despite that, she never tried once to take advantage of her vanity, causing her to suffer more from her success. She uses her skills to allow others like Juan, Ren, and Nora to rise up, which is very commendable, but it's always at the expense of what she really wants, since she feels as if no one truly understands her. Well, anyone other than Jean. She is not taking action. For this reason, Pyrrha was my favorite character this volume, despite her appearances being brief. She had complex and intriguing motivations. Her unnecessary selflessness made her pitiable, but slightly inspiring. There's a lot of other hijinks that ensues, like the whole Neptune rejecting Weiss drama, the dance number, and the other more superior dance number. But I don't think that will be important for this review. The main idea that stems from Pyrrha and Jean's situation is the question of whether or not it's appropriate to take action. Pyrrha had thought that in her not taking action, she chose the needs of others rather to suit her own interest, and the Ironwood versus Ozpin situation is very similar. The debate acts as the foundation of the volume's main plot. Should we allow Ironwood to exercise his military might so that he can handle the situation immediately, i.e. take action, or should we listen to Ozpin and plan things carefully as to not stir up worry in a nation that is currently experiencing a time of peace? Refrain from taking action. If you loved The Handmaid's Tale, I know I didn't since I had to freaking study the book for my final exams, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the statement, a frog in a boiling pot of water. The same way a frog would die before even knowing it had boiled to death, Ironwood believes that if action isn't taken immediately, the world would crumble away before anyone could even react. He feels very uneasy about the way Ozpin is handling things because he just isn't sure how much heat he's willing to take before he even decides to do anything substantial that could handle the situation. It's why, at the end of the volume, he had convinced a power much higher than Ozpin to make it so that Atlas's forces run security for the tournament in Volume 3. There was also this fantastic piece of lore that we get from Dr. Oobleck.
Why are they still so close to the city? What are they doing?
Wait.
The pot is still boiling, and who knows what will be left of the frog if it is left for too long. Ain't that right, Blake?
Torchwick, the White Fang, all of it. Something big is happening and no one is doing anything about it.
Blake's fears about the White Fang have increased tenfold since the revelation that Torchwick has been aiding them, to the point where she lost sleep over it after another incident with him. The group had planned to gather information about him and the White Fang, and were very successful. They had pinpointed the location of one of his bases of operations thanks to Weiss's efforts in getting intel from the Schnee Dust Company at the terminal tower. Now, I'm gonna go on a bit of a tangent. Penny and Ruby's interaction was handled a bit clumsily. Weiss and Ruby just happened to be walking in the exact same area she was, and at the exact moment,
At this time of the year, in these latitudes.
Ruby drops her phone, Penny just spawns there conveniently. Yang found out that Roman had enlisted the help of some of the mafia men from the Yellow Trailer, and Blake found out that there was a massive fault in Ironwood's defenses since they were able to appropriate some of his new technology. This all climaxed into an altercation with him on the highway, where he once again got away. Now, I would say letting him go was Ruby's fault for not using her super speed, but it wouldn't have worked regardless since Mommy Neapolitan is in town, and it would be very stupid for her to pursue them when she has cleanup duty to deal with. A lot of people got hurt because of that giant robot. Tangent aside, Blake has every reason to fear them, but she's taking action at the expense of her own health, which is where Yang comes in. Yang speaks about the dangers about harboring a mindset such as Blake's. Her desire to do what's right has become an obsession, and Blake is unwilling to listen to reason, so her friend plays the best possible card she could. She gets personal with her, and it's actually a very powerful moment between them. By the way, all talk about shipping is reserved for the next video, unless it's about Pyrrha and Jean. If I spoke about Yang and Blake's romance, well, I'd just be letting things get out of hand.
You stupid n-
I am not a good person, nor am I good at telling jokes. There's a lot at play when talking about this moment. First, there's an aspect to RWBY which I think it should definitely use more when either divulging its lore or exploring the backstories of the characters. It's the 2D storybook animation art style. They bring this old creepy children's book aesthetic with its dark particle effects, gritty backgrounds, and its sharp yet rough brushstrokes on screen, thus enhancing the darker aspects of the stories being communicated by the dialogue. This kind of animation is used as Yang describes the tale of how she became obsessed with finding her mother by presenting it in a way that is reflective of how her innocence was warped by the situation. She had taken her search to such a length that it not only put her in danger, but RWBY as well. The only reason there they're alive is because someone had been looking out for them. Yang showcases what Ozpin had been arguing, the importance of restraint. Ozpin believes that acting immediately is absolutely reckless and would only lead to distress, which is reasonable from his side. He's also more concerned with how James is conducting the whole situation, in how he constantly flexes his military prowess as a means of showing that he is in control of everything. Ironwood is like many military leaders of history. They want to exercise their power because they fear that there is something they are unable to control. Obviously, there may be a compromise to their situation, but both of them are unable to realize just what it is, and we aren't given that answer. At the moment, it's only a matter of time until the other is proven right, and unfortunately for Ozpin, the situation on the highway, the break-in at the terminal tower, and the city nearly being overrun by Grimm during the final moments of the volume were without question enough for Ironwood to get the opportunity to exercise his control, i.e., take action. The final arc of the volume shows Team RWBY exploring an abandoned city. Any sense of progress from its markets to buildings under construction were destroyed. The gang had decided to come here since this is the location of Torchwick's base. We already know how this ends. They found the base, the city nearly got overrun by Grimm, and then the volume ends with the Adam and Torchwick cliffhangers, which are actually pretty darn good in terms of what they offer the overall theme.
When you prepare to go to war, which do you send in first? The flag bearer or the scouts?
Going back to Ozpin's argument, a scout is meant to inform you of all the potential dangers you could face, and in the way that Ironwood is conducting himself shows us that he'd rather stop the fire rather than find its cause to stop any more fires from happening. That's what Ozpin feared most. He wanted to get to the bottom of things, but that was at the cost of the pot boiling until all the water had turned to vapor, leaving only the dried corpse of the frog. There is more going on than we have been led to believe, and Volume 3 is confirmation of that. But first, let's get some closing words for Volume 2. As we've seen, Volume 2's thematic writing is very well rounded across the board, as it's well woven throughout all aspects of the story. Volume 1's main weakness is that its substance comes from rehashed cliches, which isn't all that bad, as I've said. It served its purpose in getting us connected with the characters, and then Volume 2's job was to start setting up the main conflict of the series. The fact that there is a much higher power at play, and no one knows how to deal with it. It showcases different types of fear. The fear of what you believe you can't control, and the fear of the unknown. The writers used action versus inaction as a means to show many aspects in how we deal with these fears and the consequences of choosing whether or not to take immediate action or assess your situation. So, after everything I've said, you might probably be convinced that the good outweighs the bad. Still, no! This volume's problems run really deep when you decide to have a conversation about them. Going over every single detail is a blessing and a curse. In between writing the scripts, I somehow convinced myself that Volume 2 was the best mainly because Monty was still in his prime, despite me having already believed that Volume 3 was the absolute peak. He passed in between the time he worked on 2 and 3, but he still managed to bring out absolute bangers of fights. A big highlight is the action direction, as always. When people speak about Volume 3, it's mostly described as the absolute best the series has to offer, and after rewatching Volume 2, I realized how much of a fool I was for ever doubting that. This volume has the best writing Luna and Shawcross have ever typed on a script. From what I've researched, Monty was able to contribute to the fight choreography to a large extent, but someone was at the wheel to finish things off for him. I could very well be wrong, please correct me, I just can't be bothered to investigate the topic further since this video is long overdue. Volume 3, Episode 7 is without question the single best episode to ever come out during the Monty era, and that's because it contains every good aspect Volume 3 has to offer. It neatly ties every aspect of the series thus far together in a well-executed and artistically driven sequence of events. A big complaint I have for Volume 3, before we get into it, is that some of the tournament fights, although pretty cool spectacles, mean jack squat. Also, that Raven cliffhanger at the end of Volume 2 didn't really impact the story when it very well should have. There really aren't that many blights to point out when I'm speaking about this volume in isolation, so nothing can completely RWBY? What aren't you doing? Wait. You actually used your super speed to solve a life-threatening issue as fast as you could? Wow, this just makes the best volume even better! You absolute bum-poo!
I'm having an existential crisis here! Fuck.
Why, Ruby? Why? Juan begged you and Weiss to get to her as fast as you could. You all knew that Pyrrha's life was on the line. You've left me with a colossal hole in my heart, all because you aren't willing to use your powers when you need them most. You know what? It's fine. Ruby has always used her powers in short bursts, even in the Red trailer. Maybe her child body isn't used to using them for extended periods of time. So, you're willing to use your powers to win a fight that had no stakes, rather than abuse them on 2 occasions where you knew your friends' lives were on the line, huh?
I've got good news. You see, there's no need to wonder where your god is, because he's right here! And he's fresh out of mercy.
Flip in a bucket. That person was right. A speedster's biggest enemy is their writer. They are forced to lose situations that are trivial to them because they wouldn't have been able to grow otherwise. So often that the only response you have to something so blatantly horrible is despair, anger, dread, fury, or any other synonyms of those words. Twice she uses her super speed initially and then stops for God knows why, since they never established what the limitations to her powers exactly were. They haven't even explained what a semblance is yet. I had to do that for you in the last video. This blatant lack of urgency has resulted in the fact that there was a greater chance that she could have saved the lives of 2 of her friends. Writers, why didn't you allow her to just try? I get it. There were people and Grimm in a way, but on both occasions, solutions were made that allowed Ruby to completely bypass her roadblocks. You could have just said that she wasn't fast enough even when using her speed, and I would have accepted that, since these deaths are important for her character growth. But now I have to come to terms with the fact that Ruby didn't care enough for her friends to use something that may very well have saved their lives. Jeez, Volume 9's a right Don't you think? The only thing I can at least be glad about is that she actually tried to use her super speed against Torchic, and they showed that he was able to react to it once she telegraphed her attacks, which is absolute bullcrap since RWBY has been shown to move at speeds that he can't react to. That moment was also ruined the moment he clearly telegraphed his attacks, and RWBY did nothing but watch and get hit. Here's another moment that's absolute BS, but you can just read this text on screen that's accompanied by the appropriate footage. You know what? Let's react to it together. How's it going, gamers? Doomy here, and today we're gonna be reacting to Neo and Torchwick versus Ruby Rose. And she hit her with the 360 hooker move. Wow. Gosh dang, man. It's just... It was so cool, but you know, there's just something about this scene that's a bit iffy. I don't want to say that it's incredibly lucky that Neo threw Ruby's weapon away and it flew away in such a configuration, in such a convenient enough configuration that it managed to hook itself onto the airship so that when Ruby got blasted away by Torchic, she could grab onto it. No. I'm not gonna say that's lucky because, you know, this scene was cool, okay? It was a cool scene. I'm also not gonna say that it's incredibly lucky that, you know, Torchwick, the man who's been characterized as a dust thief, you know, that substance that can let you do magic, right? He didn't try to use any other forms of dust. Just imagine if he shot her with electricity dust. She would have been paralyzed and she would have fallen off and would have been just imagine what would have happened if he shot her with ice dust. She would have been frozen, fallen off, and would have been fucked. But, you know, let's just not get ahead of ourselves, okay? This scene totally isn't contrived, alright? There's also another really important detail that's established about Emerald's power, which I purposefully didn't acknowledge at the start of the video. One might say I provided a solution that could fix many of her character interactions. Actions are done by who or what is real can affect how convincing the hallucinations are. When Team Chem was attacking Amber, the Fall Maiden, everyone had to stand in complete silence as to not give away their positions, even when her semblance was activated. Now, one could argue that over time she improved her power to remove this limitation, but as we are shown through Penny and Nora's fight, that isn't necessarily the case since Kira disrupted it using outside influences relative to the hallucinations. If anything, they were incredibly lucky that Yang shot Mercury in the first place. In this scenario, there was no guarantee that Yang would resort to violence for self-defense, since his attack was clearly telegraphed. Yang shooting him helped sell their story, but I just can't shake the feeling that there was a strong chance that she could have acted differently. If she never shot him and someone happened to make contact with a fake injury on Mercury to maybe cover up blood with a bandage, therefore disrupting the hallucination, then the whole charade would have been over the moment Yang claims she never shot him. Here's a suggestion. One possibility is that they tried to get on her nerves by taunting her, since throughout the series we've seen how easy it is to get under her skin. I know he called her Blondie in this scene, but after Yang had won, she was pretty humble about it. I doubt in this instance she would be petty enough to respond to remarks like that in violence. Maybe Mercury could have said something that she would really take personally, or maybe another thing could have been said about Blake, which I'll get into. So yeah, shotgunning Tuxin was a really bad idea. It's highly probable that Emerald's semblance may have not even been able to cover up their method of murder, so they should have been caught, or at the very least, someone should have been really suspicious about what happened in that store. Solution, they should have just stabbed him and taken him to the back, or established that Emerald's semblance can mask sounds. Cinder really had a point to make when she told them specifically not to mess around, but she's as much of an idiot as they are, so it really doesn't count. This is what happens when you just introduce a power system and you don't take time to lay out the ground rules carefully, which is a practice pretty much every superpower story takes up. Well, the good ones at least. For the most part. Also, I need to make another note about Penny. It may be possible that those two Bellend guards from before didn't know that Penny was a robot, since apparently Ironwood wants to keep that under wraps. However, that's kind of confusing seeing as many random people seem to know that she is significant to his future plans, like the person that picked her up from the docks in Volume 1, who was never fully given an identity, even to this day, these two randomly placed guards, and the guards that attended the dance with her. Okay, Let's just say, hypothetically, they didn't know what Penny was and what she was capable of. Now I ask, why the hell did James not ask her if she saw anything the night of the dance at the very least? How come those two bellends never asked the two guards that were already at the party if they saw anything, thus making Penny know subsequently since she's under strict supervision, meaning she's not allowed to leave their side? I'm saying this assuming they never left at the same time as James, since that wasn't clearly indicated. From our understanding, as long as someone is with Penny, then she's okay to goof around. Can we please just exhaust all of our resources before we dare to make the claim that stakes exist? Pretty please? Monty said that his priority was building upon the culture's Remnant had to offer because that would better inform how you'd write the characters, but that clearly wasn't done enough. What would have been very interesting was briefly seeing how the White Fang affected the lives of other contestants who were Faunus, or better yet, what they may have thought about Blake. Heck, you could even find a way to include Son in the whole debacle. Before anyone says anything, and spoiler warning, something like this does get explored in Volume 4 and 5, but it's weird that not a single White Fang member acknowledged Blake as Adam's ex so far. For context, Adam had told the White Fang to stop searching for Blake after the train incident, but the mindset that he still wants to find Blake should still exist, not only in him, but those who chose to follow him. I mean, some of them should feel a bit bad for failing to find her in the first place. They're people after all. It was his platoon that helped out Cinder and Torchwick, so how is it that none of them properly acknowledged Blake at the docks? Additionally, if Blake worked for someone like Adam, and considering her lineage, which is something that Volume 4 just retroactively put into question, why is it that other Faunuses don't recognize her as an ex-radicalist? They never said anything like, "It's the mistress," "It's the leader's woman," or "It's Miss Belladonna." Wait just a gosh darn moment. If Blake had this much baggage, why does she even use her real name around people? I get that not much was known about her by her friends and even Ozpin, but why even take the risk of being recognized? Wait just a gosh darn moment. Torchwick knew Team Seaman knew Adam, and Adam knew Blake. They had to have discussed who and what was trying to stop them, right? They've been a nuisance not only to Torchwick, but the White Fang too. Hell, one of the radicalists had to have definitely reported Blake's actions to Adam. I mean, if you never discuss any of your problems with the people you're working with, that just means those problems are bound to occur again. And this is Team RWBY we're talking about, the people who have made incredible efforts to stop the antagonists at every turn. Cinder also seemed pretty pissed off at the fact that Torchwick didn't kill Tuxin sooner, so they definitely discussed the faults in their plans. I get that you're villains, but you're not morons, right? Actually, they are. I mean, that's pretty much consistent with how they've been characterized so far, so that's just an invalid criticism. Imagine if the villains pulled an Orion on Blake, but this time the stuff they said was actually true. I'm pretty sure exposing Blake's past would have done way more damage than framing Yang. Not only would people be mad at Ozpin for allowing a criminal into his school, but people would also be mad at the members of Team RWBY for harboring said criminal. Also, Adam wants her to suffer for what she's done to him, apparently, so that's some really good ammo for him. Yeah, she's RWBY, Weiss, and Yang's friend, but that doesn't ignore the fact that she straight up admitted to committing crimes, and it doesn't matter if she was against them.
Of liars, thieves, and murderers.
Well, maybe we were just tired of being pushed around. At first they were accidents, then it was self-defense. Before long, even I began to think he was right.
At the end of the day, she was still a willing participant in theft, the destruction of military-grade property, and the definite enabling of killing of many soldiers who were just following orders and innocent people. Also, you have to remember, despite all of the good things preached about Team RWBY in the news, there will always be the vocal minority that will hate Blake once that neat little twitlonger is made about her. Wow, implications just don't know when to give up. Not sure about you, but that kind of seems like a way more effective way of making her past haunt her, since that is the very foundation her character is built upon, instead of only making it so that Blake's edgelord not boyfriend cuts Yang's arm off. Heck, maybe even frame Yang and slander Blake to super duper screw them over, since Cinder wants everything to go exactly the way she planned, and she's willing to utilize any new information at her disposal to better suit what her original methods were. I mean, she did that the moment she found out that Penny was a robot. Alright, time to stop barking about wasted potential. for now. Volume 3 acts as the showcase of the consequences of the two themes present in Volume 2. This is the fall of Beacon Academy, and everything we have ever known is being questioned. Episode 7 is undoubtedly the best in the series so far because of how it presents the shocking reality that Beacon never fell in one night. It neatly ties together everything the conflict has been leading to together, although I do wish they did way more with Torchwick and Neo. The best part about all of this is Cinder. I think the best lens to look at her is one in which we compare and contrast her to RWBY and how their respective charismas function. Firstly, let's look at how RWBY went about befriending Weiss. During the Emerald Forest arc, RWBY never cared once for Weiss's status nor her skill, only her as a person, and she was demoralized to have to be forced to put up with her through all of high school. Through their differences, they were able to learn more about each other and themselves, hence their friendship blossomed. Let's see how Cinder went about befriending Emerald and Mercury.
How did you do that? Tell me, are you anything like your father?
Cinder merely sees those around her as tools. They are only good if they fit two conditions. The first being, they have something that they can offer her. As you saw, one of the first things she ever asked Emerald and Mercury were related to what exactly they were capable of. The second condition, they have to be obedient. Remember those eyes in quotes I said earlier? Emerald, an individual who prioritized her own needs above others, felt a sense of gratitude towards Cinder. One that was so great that she was willing to put up with Cinder's abuse as long as it meant pleasing her. The bottom line is that Cinder exercises her power in a way that puts others in a subservient posture. Take how she won over Adam's allegiance. She decimated his forces, thus backing him into a corner, but then offered him more money and power than he could ever imagine, as a way of playing into the passion he had for his cause, despite him initially refusing to work with her. Cinder is the best aspect of this whole episode mainly because she acts as the source of everyone's characterization. Emerald's, Mercury's, Torchwick's, and even Adam's. The fall of Beacon was meticulously crafted in such a way that it prevented immediate action whilst remaining hidden enough for those to refrain from taking action to assess the situation. There was simply a power at play that no one, even with any amount of preparation, could comprehend. The way in which all of this was set up is excellent writing from Luna, Shawcross, and Monty's part. All of this unraveled into what is considered one of the darkest volumes of RWBY ever produced. Due to the break-in at the Terminal Tower, Cinder was able to rig fights in a way that simultaneously sabotaged Team RWBY, Ironwood, and Ozpin. It had gotten to the point where the very technology that Ironwood put his soul into developing to take a stand against this insurmountable threat was being used against him, this all being a result of his desire to control. Blake's past comes back with a vengeance. She is reunited with the person that she abandoned back on the train, Adam. Blake's character is defined by her ability to make a stand against her horrifying past, to ensure that it is never repeated, but some things were too painful for her to overcome. Adam absolutely outclassed her in skill during their fight, and he broke her spirit too.
No, please.
A concept that was introduced into RWBY was that of fairy tales not being mere fictional stories, but actually interwoven with the world of Remnant itself. Now, it's not your classic fairy tales that the characters are based off of. Instead, these are ones strictly from Remnant. One being the tale of the Maidens, 4 women whose power to control the seasons is passed down at random, or to the last female they thought about, granted they are not some elderly woman who's about to croak. Pyrrha was selected as the next candidate by Ozpin to be the Fall Maiden. She was going to be one of the miracles the world was looking for. Cinder had both critically injured and stolen a portion of Amber's, the previous Fall Maiden's, powers. It was feared that since Cinder already had a piece of the Fall Maiden power, she would be the most likely candidate to receive the rest of them when Amber dies, so the plan was to transfer the rest of the power into Pyrrha, which may have been at the cost of her entire personality. Some nice world building that was introduced was that transferring someone's aura into another person is like completely significantly altering their soul, since an aura is heavily ingrained in one's personality. A concept that is similar to this is explored in much more detail in the character Oscar, who's introduced in Volume 4. Again, Pyrrha was putting the wants and needs of others before her own because she felt as if she was the only person that could, which is very admirable and pitiable. This trait of hers sadly led to her own demise. Cinder had successfully killed Amber and taken all of the powers. After Ozpin had failed to take her down, Pyrrha put her life on the line to stop her, but met a similar fate to Ozpin. Okay, this scene has been memed like, what, 16 times now? I'm pretty sure it's lost its punch to many of you. RWBY has continuously made tremendous efforts throughout the volume to rise above all of her circumstances, even seeing to it that the airship Torchwick had commandeered was taken down. After witnessing the passing of two of her friends, a completely broken Yang, a person who she'd expect to be one of the most determined in solving what went down at Beacon, and after hearing that the entire group dynamic she had built up in Team RWBY had been shattered, she decides to carry on since she's one of the only people that can. Having silver eyes is a trait few people have that allow them to strike a Grim down by just looking at them. Essentially, it's RWBY's version of Conqueror's Haki. In all honesty, this was the show's best use of foreshadowing thus far. It could have been a lot better in other places, but hey, at least we have something! The statement Ozpin made worked successfully because it felt out of place. It had no relevance to any of the other things he told RWBY the night they met. To those who were vigilant and kept note of it, you would have been left wondering why he even made the remark, to then have your curiosity rewarded with this payoff. To those who brushed it off, you'd have a similar feeling to RWBY, confusion that then turns into a shocking epiphany. This moment also gives some relevance to the song Red Like Roses. Crow mentions the fact that RWBY was special the same way her mother was, and Summer, in the song, mentions that she passed something down to her since she forced a bigger sacrifice onto her. I had originally planned to analyze the song's lyrics more in depth, but I kinda became hesitant, mostly due to the fact that the song is going to be way more important for Volume 10. However, that's dependent on whether or not it gets greenlit. Volume 9 was hot garbage. Holy crap. RWBY has a future full of burdens. However, she moves onward, and moving onward is going to be the most important theme in the series going forward. She is an innocent girl with the kindness of Red Riding Hood, but the killer instinct and skill of a Grim Reaper. This is a path that she is both destined and determined to take. What the world of Remnant desperately needs at this moment is someone to make it the fairy tale it so desperately needs to be. I was going into this retrospective with a write-as-I-go-along mindset. I wanted to approach the series with both a very holistic view of everything whilst still being able to somewhat enjoy things as if I were watching them for the first time. This is because I didn't want to give things too much credit than they actually deserved, like I felt I was sort of doing in previous drafts of the script. Also, I wanted my opinions to continually evolve as we take this journey together. My constantly changing perspective is what I want to use for the conclusion of this particular video. As I've said, I'm in the camp of people that believe that RWBY should have remained lighthearted, but also I do believe that Volume 3 needed to happen, and I know this doesn't make sense right now, but trust me, you'll see what I mean in a bit. Remember that line from the Jello Apocalypse video?
The best way to watch Roomba is to think of the first 3 volumes as one long season, and then have a friend tell you what happens in 4 and 5 so you don't have to watch them cause they're garbage.
These first 3 volumes, as clumsy as many of their moments were, still achieved something magnificent. They set up an incredibly intriguing narrative, which unfortunately falls very flat because it does a terrible job of delivering on all of its promises, and the first 3 volumes failed miserably in another department: commitment. In short, RWBY is a show that does a good job of introducing characters, but does a dreadful job of exploring them. Unless they're a part of the main cast, of course. Actually, scratch that. Even if they're in the main cast, they'll end up being crap in the long run. Let's talk about who I think was the most disrespected character in the series. Glinda Goodwitch. She's an individual who is grossly underused in the narrative despite her heavy involvement with key characters such as Ozpin and Ironwood. We all know her best as the strict by-the-books teacher that puts the greater good before anything else. She appears to be an individual whose trust and respect is very hard to earn, and barely anything is done to play into how that affects her relationship with other characters. Ozpin's judgment. This is something that the narrative has constantly questioned as it went along, and yet we never get to see how that affects the person who trusts his judgment the most. There was a one-on-one conversation she had with James. He's struggling to come to terms with the fact that the man whom he has put his undying loyalty into may be keeping secrets from them due to his passive behavior, but Glinda completely reassures him that Ozpin is doing quite the opposite. However, James makes a valuable point since he's proven right at the very end of the volume about their failure to take action. We see how this affects Ozpin, but not Glinda. Not once does this seemingly hard-to-please individual question how well her boss is actually handling things, which just raises another question. Why on earth does she trust him so much? Remember when Weiss was talking with Mr. Port and he said he had a tremendous amount of faith in him? It would have been nice to see exactly what other qualities Ozpin has that makes him so charismatic other than his nice speeches. We can also see that Glinda's respect is earned through people working hard. Oh, she's built a better relationship with the students she has constantly scolded for the whole show, and she's on a first-name basis with some of them? Well, damn, my fellow with melanated skin. I wish I was there for that too! There was such a good opportunity to have her do something, however we're given Dr. Oobleck as a substitute. Instead of having Dr. Oobleck go with the girls to the abandoned city, she could have gone, and it could have really serviced the narrative well. For starters, Ironwood was feeling very uneasy about the White Fang, so she could have gone since he trusts her as well as Ozpin. Secondly, it could have been an excellent opportunity to see how a by-the-books personality interacts with a group as supposedly chaotic and ill-disciplined as Team RWBY after the altercation in the terminal and the highway. We'd finally get to see just what it takes for her trust to be earned, and she could function as the foil that enables the team to act more maturely as a whole, since that was the idea this arc was trying to push to us. This could then come to fruition in the tournament, where we have a moment where Glinda could say, "Hey, I taught them that move." Glinda is one of many underused characters in this series. If you've watched all of RWBY, I'm sure none of you can recall any appearance Coco has made post Volume 3. Okay, she's back in RWBY Chibi. Or even Velvet, who revealed her awesome ability to perfectly replicate people's weapons and fighting styles. Wait, she's in RWBY Chibi too. Is RWBY Chibi doing a better job of fleshing out the supporting cast than the actual show itself? Well, there goes the character that your community helped fully design. She's been reserved only for the spin-off series. I mean, we do get some fan favorites coming back in later volumes, but you absolutely cannot shake the feeling like that was just done for the sake of fan service. How many characters were actually introduced during this tournament? We know absolutely nothing about them. Aren't tournament arcs special because we get to see multiple individuals from many walks of life all having something to either gain or lose depending on how well they do? When Flint was competing, he had personal beef with Weiss because of her lineage and what that represented. What if winning this tournament meant that he and his father could finally reopen that shop due to some publicity and start earning income again? It freaking hurts that I might have to turn to fanfics to find satisfying resolutions for these characters. Actually, you know what? Don't do that, especially with Starco Comics. The show should have been lighthearted for much longer. That would have allowed more time for the writers to build on the dynamics these characters had in low to medium stakes conflict. What would have been really nice is seeing the other things huntsmen and huntresses have to do other than killing Grimm and go on government operations. I'm just gonna say hunters from now on since I see BA saying both words at this point. How are hunters even assigned missions? Must they always report to the head of the institution they learned in, or are there guilds that they can take commissions from? Are there consulting hunters, as in ones that are not tied to a specific organization, that roam the wilds and build up their reputation solo unless directly contacted for help? I'm asking the latter question considering RWBY has a setting grounded in fantasy and was set in a school. One of the advantages of using a school is the fact that you can provide many excuses for exposition in the form of classes. Before each team went out on their expeditions, you could have gone into the nitty-gritty of a hunter's job. You know, explore the world through the lenses of different people instead of your primary four characters, to make the world feel more like a world and the story feel more like a story. A complaint I came across was that Pyrrha barely had a relationship with her team. I mean, we got to see how Team RWBY works as a unit on the highway after many months with each other. What's stopping us from seeing how Team Juniper operates as a unit? Do not mention the tournament arc. This isn't criticism of the tournament arc. Although, what makes each school competing in the Vital Festival unique? Do they have different different ways in which they use dust? How do they go about making their weapons? Something I've spoken very little about in this retrospective. Are there specific fighting styles and environments that they thrive in due to the circumstances of their births? Do not mention Faunus's. Please don't. This isn't about them. But in fairness, so far the only application of a Faunus's abilities have been the night vision and Son's monkey tail. I guess that is something, albeit a bit disappointing in retrospect. Kinda makes you wish they did more with that before they went completely in depth with them later. You know, to drum up expectations, because other than Tuxin, Faunuses have been fighting the same way any other human being would. Imagine if Blake had claws on her fingers. Would have been pretty cool to explore that. Say, her weapon gets knocked away by Adam, so in order to fend him off, she treats him like a curtain. Was that racist? You know what? Yang can use a laser pointer to get her attention, so I guess it's not. The first 3 volumes had the ambition to introduce one of the most colorful casts to ever come out of an internet original series, but never had the commitment to flesh any of them out in a way that felt meaningful. The only narrative significance this tournament arc had was that it was the perfect front for Cinder to decimate Beacon completely, regardless of whether or not Never Miss a Beat was the best fight ever produced by Rooster Teeth. One of the things that made this show appealing was the fact that it was being made on such a small scale, yet its potential was inversely proportional to it. The visuals may have aged like milk, but that was a non-issue since, to many at the time of its release, it was being backed by excellent action direction from a man who was taken from us too soon. Had we formed genuine connections with more characters and the world, the whole school blowing up in the end would have been way more impactful. We would have had way more to lose, but now it kinda falls flat. As well as they executed everything for some parts, why would they go out of their way to nuke everything to Kingdom Come so quickly? The writers technically sped ran through narrative progression, and since everything is a yeah no yeah, they kinda reached the end and forgot they're in a game that has a strict checkpoint system, so technically things are unfinished. I have been searching for interviews on why they took this approach in the first place. I went to page 5 of Google twice, okay? I could not find jack squat on why they did this, other than the fact that they planned all of this from the start. After watching their interview from Comic-Con 2015, an interesting point that was brought up was that they had basically gotten a solid roadmap of where they wanted to go with the series since Volume 1. The school was always going to blow up, and they knew exactly what they wanted to do with all the important characters. That puts a lot into perspective. This is mostly speculation, I could be very wrong, but I think saying that they lost focus after Monty died is applicable, but only to a certain extent. They knew what they wanted to do with Monty's vision, but I'm not too sure they knew how they were gonna go about fulfilling it. Volume 3 is an incredible triumph and a haunting omen. It does all the best things that RWBY has to offer in quite a spectacular fashion, but many of its wrongdoings will be representative of how flat the series will fall as a whole in the future. Who honestly knows? If Monty were alive today, would things have been different? I'd imagine that he'd have a very high role within Rooster Teeth, just due to the fact that he created their most popular show to date. We would constantly be treated to some of the best 3D fight scenes you could ever imagine. Maybe people would still have at least one reason to like Rooster Teeth, but that's a discussion for someone else to have, since I don't like talking about drama in detail all that often. The part that hurts the most is that I have to go into the next 3 volumes again, but this time I'm completely aware of how garbage they have been described as. That is going to be a lot of suffering that I'm not too willing to do right now. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and a dislike and a comment on what you didn't enjoy and what could be improved. For now, I'm going to cry since this video took forever to make, and life will keep unlifing me. Hambagashle, and have a good week. By the way, you're never seeing the Yuri Yuri avatar ever again. Bye!
Yeah, going 8 like nigga. Move out the way, please don't be a hero. Bling loud, she no skateboard P. Bling loud, she no skateboard P.